Welcome, Wagner Society members. We're here today for a very special program with our own Emma Popek, who is our treasurer, and but she's also a world traveler and goes all over to hear Wagner's works and other works. And so she's going to give us a talk about Bayreuth, the history of Bayreuth, which goes back very, very far. It didn't just start having a history when Richard Wagner decided to build his Festspielhaus there. So this will be really very interesting. So we'll go ahead and start. And what I will do is I'll just turn you over to Emma, and hopefully I can hide myself and go away. And Emma, here you go.
Well, thank you very much, Terry. I can try to hide you. Hold on one second, folks. I can't now, but that's all right. Okay, so anyway, Bayreuth, a history. Thank you for joining me today to hear about the history of Bayreuth. We all know Bayreuth as a place to go for music and a place where Wagner lived. But as I discovered, Bayreuth has a very interesting history preceding Wagner. Wagner was just an exclamation mark on the Bayreuth's history page. Before Wagner, there were some interesting things going on there, which actually are a reflection of a broader European history. Bayreuth didn't escape at the course of history with all its trials and tribulations. So people don't know what Bayreuth is. I talk to people who are not Wagnerians and who are not opera goers, and they have no idea what Bayreuth is, how to pronounce its name, Bayreuth or whatever. And I always explain to them about Bayreuth and its history and its relation to Wagner. But for us who know about the relation to Wagner and Wagner family, we always have questions, or at least I do have questions. What is Bayreuth? Is it a place, an idea? Is it a theater? Is it a destination, some kind of holy grail? Is it a dream? Is it a good place, a place to love, or is it a place to abhor? These questions constantly pop in my mind. And I think Bayreuth is all of these. And we will see how it happened to be this way. So the answer is all of the above. I divided the history of Bayreuth into 5 different periods. The first one is kind of prehistory. It's from Middle Ages to the 19th century when it became sort of an imperial town. Then the days of glory, it is the days of Wagner. The days of infamy. These are the days of course, the advent of the Nazi to power, their appropriation of Bayreuth, and the destruction of Bayreuth during World War II. The next step in Bayreuth's history is Neue Bayreuth. It is what happened after the war, the days of renunciation and revival. And Bayreuth today, the days of innovative theater and a place of pilgrimage. So we won't review the last 2 periods because we're all very much familiar with them. We'll focus on the history of Bayreuth from the Middle Ages to the 19th century, then Wagner's days, when the sun of Bayreuth has risen, and the days of World War II and the preceding time when really Bayreuth fell into a deep and dark abyss. So Bayreuth is located literally, let me turn on my laser pointer, very far from everything, as the ones who traveled there can testify. It is 3 hours away from Frankfurt or from Munich. The travel involves planes, trains, automobiles, and horse races, everything. Bayreuth is located in Bavaria on the Red Main River. Please note how close it is to the current Czech Republic, or Bohemia in the old days. This is important because we'll revisit this connection later. Bayreuth was a agglomeration of villages in the river valley. And the early villages that date back to the 11th century. In the 12th century, at the end of the 12th century, in 1194, Bayreuth was mentioned in some of the church correspondence as Bayreuth. In 1231, it received its own town charter and became a town in Nuremberg Principality. Later in the 14th century, 1368, Bayreuth became a separate principality, the Kulmbach-Bayreuth Principality. It first appeared on the map in 1421 as part of the Holy Roman Empire. And in 1528, the whole region switched to Lutheran Church. The Holy Roman, yeah, we did it already. Let's go back. The shield of Bayreuth shows two crossing sticks. These are the sticks which maybe were a farmer's tool, and they are called Reuth in German, so therefore Bayreuth. The very old shield of Bayreuth is shown above, where we have hammers or maybe some other tools. It's hard to tell, nobody actually knows. But basically it is the same kind of a design. So Bayreuth was considered a city from 1231. It was ruled by Margraves of Nuremberg, which acquired this land. The Margraves of Nuremberg were Hohenzollerns, and this is the ruling dynasty of Germany until 1918, when after the First World War, Germany was completely destroyed and the ruling order changed. Margrave is a medieval title. I wondered, what is Margrave? It is a military commander in charge of borderlands in the Holy Roman Empire. Often it is a hereditary title. It is similar to Graf or Count. Graf is a German name which derives from grave, and also it's the same in Russian. Graf is a count. Bayreuth developed very slowly and was affected by many disasters. But before we get to that, I want to show you the map of the Holy Roman Empire, because, you know, German history is very mysterious and dark. And there are so many different events and so many different lands that change hands. To me, it's almost incomprehensible. But the Holy Roman Empire, at its greatest extent, shown on the map on the left, existed already in the 13th century. Please note that it owned a part of Italy and a part of France, Burgundy, namely, and all of the German lands, including Prussia, what today is Prussia, and Poland. So later, the Holy Roman Empire became known as the Empire of German Nation, after 1512. It was a political body in the Central and Western Europe, usually headed by the Holy Roman Emperor. It was developed in the Middle Ages, as we have seen, and lasted for almost 1,000 years, until it was dissolved in 1806 after the Napoleonic Wars. The adoption of the new name of Germanic lands coincided with the loss of the lands in Burgundy and northern Italy. And thus this whole big chunk of land populated by different people, by the way, with different languages, but mostly of them are Germanic and not Slavic, except for in this part. This all became a part of the Holy German nation empire. So Bayreuth here, if you look carefully, there's a red dot. Our poor little Bayreuth is again shown on the map as an insignificant little place. The Bayreuth Principality didn't have much going for it then now. But in the Middle Ages, an event happened. Hussites invaded Bayreuth in 1430. I was surprised to see that because Hussites, I don't know who knows much about Hussites. We learned about Hussites at school back in the 60s, I think. And the Hussites are called this way after their leader, Jan Hus. Jan Hus was a Czech reformer. Hussites experienced his followers, were very military, very militant. They developed quite a few of military innovation, and they waged holy wars with the Catholic Church. In 1430, Hussites came from their lands, which were Bohemia and Moravia. They were Czechs, Moravians, and Bohemians. They overran Bayreuth. They were waging a war against the Christian Church and later a war against themselves. Because once they reached a deal with the Christian Church, they became militant towards each other. There was, of course, a right-wing group and a left-wing group, so to speak, that couldn't find common grounds. So the Hussites from Bohemia attacked Kulmbach and Bayreuth in February, in winter of 1430, and committed great acts of cruelty, like wild animals, against the common people and certain individuals. These individuals are the priests, monks, and nuns. They either burnt at the stake or took them into the ice of the lakes and rivers, and doused them with cold water and killed them in a deplorable way. And this is a quote from a chronicle. Hussites destroyed the churches in Bayreuth and the town hall also. Who was Jan Hus, the leader of Hussites? Jan Hus was a first reformer, Czech Protestant reformer, who was promoting theological ideas of John Wycliffe against the corruption of the Catholic Church and the papacy. Of course, the church captured him and burned him at a stake because he was a heretic. Here is an engraving of Jan Hus. By the way, Hus means goose in Czech and in Russian. So here it says Johannes Huson. Johannes Hus von Prague. And here the Johannes Hus from Prague is being burned at a stake. Later, he became a national hero of the Czechs, and there is a monument to him in Prague. He is quite venerated. It's interesting that so early, 100 years before Luther, the Czech Reformation started. And as a result, Bohemia and Moravia followed the Hussitism, a brand of Protestantism. The church conducted 4 crusades against Hussites, and they finally reached some kind of agreement on how to actually divide the church power. But the internal strife, as I said, ended the Hussite movement. Hussites had interesting innovations in their conducting of warfare. Again, I learned about it in school in Russia. at this time, there was a great development of firearms and artillery. And in addition to that, the Hussite invented an armored wagon. It was, I would say, the first tank. Inside this armored wagon, they had the artillery in the form of small cannons called hufnice, which later became howitzer. They also had small hand-hand weapons, which were called pistola, and it became our pistol. They were traveling warriors. Using their fortified wagons, they made a circle. They circled the wagons before Americans started doing it in the Wild West. And these wagons, this kind of a structure, a fortified wagon defense wall, was virtually impervious to the enemies. So they shot their howitzers and pistols in every direction. They threw lances, and they had some cavalry inside the camp that could jump the walls of the camp or the wagons and attack the enemy. The Hussites attained quite a legendary status in Czechia. And in 1883, Dvorak composed his Hussite overture, which is based on the melodies used by Hussite soldiers. It was often performed by the German conductor Hans von Bülow. I listened to this overture. It starts very folk song-like, but then it becomes very militaristic. Clearly, this was written based on history of Hussite wars. So this was a disaster for Bayreuth, the Hussite invasion, but they recovered. But then other disasters typical of Middle Europe or Europe in general struck. There was a great fire in 1605 that destroyed half of the town's 280 houses. There was plague in 1620. There was another fire in 1621, and Bayreuth was significantly damaged during the 30-Year War, 1618 to 1648. The 30-Year War was one of the longest and most destructive conflicts in European history. It was fought primarily in Central Europe, and up to 8 million civilians and soldiers are estimated to have died as a result of the battle, famine, or disease. And parts of modern Germany reported population decline over 50% during the 30-Year War. This war was traditionally viewed as a continuation of the religious conflict initiated by Reformation and the Holy Roman Empire Church. So Bayreuth, as I said, developed very slowly. But then in the 17th century, something changed. And a Hohenzollern Margrave Christian moved his residence from Kulmbach to Bayreuth in 1603. And the Margravian construction started in Bayreuth. He built a castle that over the years became the Old Castle, Alte Schloss, and we've seen it, of course, when in Bayreuth. His grandson, Christian Ernst, defended the wall of Vienna from the Turks in 1683. This was a decisive battle. The Turks were repelled at the walls of Vienna. And after he returned back to Bayreuth, he commissioned a commemorative Margrave fountain in 1605. Something wrong with the date. So this should be 1583, not 16. So in 1605, he commissioned this fountain, which depicts him, of course, as a victorious person on a big horse. And there is a lot of symbolic statuary surrounding the pedestal of the statue. This was set up somewhere in Bayreuth. I think it was set up in front of the old castle, but later it was moved, and now it can be seen in front of the new castle. Also, during these days, the Hermitage Castle was founded outside the city limits as a retreat from the overwhelming princely duties in Bayreuth. Schools were founded. Christian Ernst was also a benefactor of arts and education. He endowed, there was a school in Bayreuth already, the Latin School of Bayreuth, but he also endowed a secondary school in 1664 that still carries his name, the Christian Ernst Secondary School in Bayreuth, Gymnasium. During this time, the outer ring of Bayreuth was reinforced with the better walls, and a castle chapel, the Schlosskirche, was built. Also, during this time, the expansion of the town church, Stadtkirche, was undertaken. And we've all seen this church. It was first built in the 12th century in 1194. And that's when Bayreuth was first mentioned in the chronicles and correspondence of the church fathers. It was destroyed by Hussites, and the new church was completed in 1495. Of course, it was damaged during the other war activities during the 30-year war, and it has somewhat an infamous history, actually. The citizens of Bayreuth were very receptive to the ideas of National Socialism. And the awakening of the nation, the power grab by the National Socialists and Nazis was overwhelmingly well received in Bayreuth's Lutheran circles. In March 1933, the local rectories hoisted a black, white, and red flag instead of the old flag. In 1933, the church councillor gave a sermon in the town church, this church, on the subject of the fall and resurgence of our people, very nationalistic. And the next day, the associations, patriotic associations, marched into the town church with flags for a church service, and the band of the SA intoned the Old Dutch prayer of Thanksgiving. In the 21st century, until the 21st century, the medieval anti-Jewish depiction of a Jewish sow or Judensau was located on the east side of the city church, right here. This weathered sculpture was defaced in 2004, and the plaque was placed below. So here I come to the subject which actually permeates German history and Catholic Church history and Lutheran Church history from the beginning of their existence. It is not a pleasant subject, it is an uncomfortable subject, but we need to know everything about history, no matter how troubling it is. I view it as a very important issue. So Judensau, I didn't know anything about it until I started working on this presentation and ran across a mention of this thing. So the Judensau or Jewish sow comes from the church fathers. The anti-Semitic writings of the church founding fathers date back to the 4th century. They wrote about how treacherous, dirty, unclean, and otherwise not of human race Jews are. Judensau is a graphic or a sculptural representation of a wicked Jew suckling from the teeth of a sow, or looking under its tail, or even worse. And the Judean sows were placed inside the churches at first, but then for the people to remember, but later they started being placed outside the churches. So the Jews remember also how they are not liked or wanted here. The Judeans, there are assumed about 30 Judean sows in Germany, and the oldest dates back to the 13th century. So some of them look like this in the Minster of Wimpfen. It's a gargoyle. Some of them are just reliefs with writing. And last week, when I was in Basel, I found a Judean sow there in the Jewish Museum. It was removed from the Minster of Basel and placed in the museum recently. And you can see the theme is the same. As to the Bayreuth, the Judean sow existed on the outside of the Holy Trinity Church until 2004. In 2004, there was a lawsuit, and as a result, this Judean sow was defaced, as shown here, and the plaque was placed below. So this was partially destroyed, but left as the reminder. So this is to show how the historical events and culture in the Holy Roman Empire of German nation led to further events that we experienced in the 20th century. All this didn't come from nowhere. It came from the long history of cultural tradition in these lands. Now, in the 18th century, the Gilded Age of Bayreuth started. Excuse me. Two important people of power settled in Bayreuth, and one of them was the Margrave Frederick and his wife, Margravine Wilhelmina, the sister of Frederick the Great. She was the older sister of Frederick the Great. She was a composer and the player herself. She appreciated music very much, and she loved the theater. She molded the present appearance of Bayreuth by adding many Baroque structures and parks. When Margrave Frederick came into inheritance in 1735, the pair decided to make Bayreuth a miniature Versailles. Their building projects included rebuilding their summer residence, now part of the Hermitage Museum, the rebuilding of the Great Bayreuth Opera House, the reconstruction of the old Bayreuth Palace, and under their, I would say, quite educated and informed hand, a unique architectural style was developed called Bayreuth Rococo. So those of us who've been to Bayreuth have seen all these magnificent buildings there and probably visited the Margravian Opera House. And all this construction and pleasant gardens that they built brought different people to Bayreuth, including occasional visits from Voltaire and Frederick the Great. So all these ambitious undertakings brought the court to the verge of bankruptcy, actually. Lavish lifestyle and lavish construction. I found the map of Bayreuth in the 18th century. So here we see one, the Hochfürst residence. This is the palace, the new palace of the Fürst, the Graf, the Count. Die Stadtkirche number 2, this is the Holy Trinity Church as we know it today. Here is the Spitalkirche, the Hospital Kirche, which still exists today. And at some distance, there is a little structure and the tower, and it's called Sophienburg. And I'm not sure what it is. I couldn't find any reference for that, but it's definitely a summer residence, which probably became the Hermitage estate. So they also brought more education and art to Bayreuth. For example, they founded the Frederick Academy, which became a university in 1714, but it moved to a different town, Erlangen, after serious riots, because the population didn't want a university among them. But the university came back, and it exists there today. There was also an Academy of Arts and Sciences that exists from 1756 to 1763. This was a liberal town under liberal rulers, by the way. The Roman Catholics were given the right to set up a prayer room, and Jewish families settled here again. Over the course of European history, Jews were either invited to live in the city and provide financial and merchant support, or they were expelled once their money was exhausted. But under these two, Margrave and Margravine, the Jews settled in Bayreuth again. And in 1760, the synagogue was opened, and the Jewish cemetery was dedicated in 1787. So I didn't have the time to visit the Hermitage parks and palaces, but many of you did, and it is truly a world-class establishment as to the beauty, the landscaping, the statuary, and everything that you will find in a big European town with a royal presence. The Hermitage Palace and parks were built not in Bayreuth, but nearby, near the village of St. Johannes, and there you can get there by bus today. Inside the city of Bayreuth, the Friedrichstrasse that we can walk along today was built with this number of houses in the style of Bayreuth Rococo. The Spitalkirche, the hospital church, was built, as I mentioned, and it is still there. The new palace was built because the old palace burned down due to the negligence of the Markgraf. So the new palace was built, and the fountain was moved to be placed in front of the new palace. And the old palace was restored eventually, and I think there's a museum there or something else. You can go there. The Baroque Rococo is an interesting style, Bayreuth Rococo. So the new castle is not much to see outside. It's a pretty severe facade, except for the grand entrance. But inside, it's very tastefully and elegantly decorated. And look at the ceiling here at the castle church and the interior, which were, light, not overloaded with detail, and very pleasant. As to the Margravel Opera House, it is still there. It's a World Heritage site. It is a masterpiece of Baroque architecture. But to my taste, it's way over-decorated. I prefer the Festspielhaus to the Margravel Opera House. It was this opera house that initially attracted Wagner to Bayreuth. It is a small house. It has only 500 seats, and the acoustics are great in this house. The auditorium retains its original materials, such as wood and canvas. It was designed by a renowned architect, theater architect at this time, Giuseppe Galli Bibbiena. It actually was foreshadowed the large public theaters in the 19th century. It was smaller and for a separate audience, a high-class audience. And that's how it is today. They still play in it. The golden age of Bayreuth actually started in the 18th century, when all this lavish construction and innovations brought by margraves started bringing people. Jean-Paul, who was born Johannes Paul Frederick Richter, moved to Bayreuth, and he died there in 1825. Those of us who've been to Bayreuth saw his house and saw his statue. And I have to mention that he is the author of a very famous novel, Abelard and Eloise. He wrote humorous romantic stories and novels. And he also supported a younger writer, E.T.A. Hoffmann, who actually credited Richter as one of his main influences. Richter wrote the preface to Fantasy Pieces, a collection of Hoffmann's short stories published in 1814. Interestingly, Hoffmann lived in Bamberg for a certain time. He was a musician and he worked at a local church. And in Bamberg, you can see a small house where Hoffmann lived. And this is for us who love Hoffmann. In the 18th century, Napoleonic wars swept over Bayreuth. Napoleon was in Bayreuth. The railroad reaches Bayreuth in 1853, and the construction continues to bring different branches and to Bayreuth. And all of a sudden, Bayreuth became highly accessible. And when Bayreuth arrived to in 1871 to sculpt the Imperial Theater, the Margravial Theater, and to set his eyes on Bayreuth, it was already a place worthy of his attention. Let's talk about Napoleon for a second, because this was important. As you remember, I said the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation fell apart during the Napoleonic Wars. And the rule of Hohenzollern over the Principality of Hombach-Bayreuth ended in 1806. Bayreuth and vicinity were occupied by the French. And it was treated as a province of the French Empire and had to pay war contributions that were so high that Bavaria ran dry out of money. So Napoleon wasn't that much interested in keeping it. He was more interested in enriching his own, the French purse. And there was an agreement reached between the Germans and the French, which allowed the Germans to buy Bavaria from Napoleon for a meager sum of 15 million francs. The principality during this years was ruled by the French. And it's interesting that the administrative head of the French government there wrote a detailed inventory of the former principality of Bayreuth, and this is an important historical document. So after the money changed hands, Bayreuth became the capital of the Bavarian district of Main-Kreis, which later was transferred into Obermain-Kreis and was finally renamed as the province of Upper Franconia. So we all know that Bayreuth is in Upper Franconia. That's how it came about. So let's go to Wagner. And this is such a huge topic. but we don't have the time to go into details here, so we'll visit only the most important parts of this history, Bayreuth and Wagner. These were the glorious days, of course, where the sun has risen over Bayreuth. Wagner arrives in Bayreuth in 1871, and he didn't like the Margravian Opera House, and we understand why. And he decided that his own theater must be built. He acquired land from town and builds the Festspiel house on the Green Hill and his own house, Wanfried. So to raise money for this construction, he went everywhere. The king, Ludwig II, didn't want to give him the money. He lended him the money. Wagner also raised money from private sources, and he toured Europe extensively with the concerts to raise money for his theater. There is an opinion that this extensive touring really hurt his health very much, causing his, let's say, early death. The Bayreuth Festival opened in 1876 and instantly became the attractant for the whole world. The tout le monde flocks to Bayreuth, including kings, composers, musicians, you name it. Anybody was seen in Bayreuth. And from this time on, Bayreuth became kind of synonymous with Wagner and with the Bayreuth Festival. I want to tell you some little snippet of information that I read about how Tchaikovsky viewed Wagner's music. He was there in 1876 to see the Ring. He didn't like the Ring one bit. He declared that Wagner was a great arranger of music, a great symphonist, but generally a bad composer. And believe it or not, this opinion still is being taught in Russian conservatories of music. But he also wrote in one of his letters that he understood how great Wagner was as a conductor. He said, Tchaikovsky said, that if you haven't heard the Fifth, Beethoven's Fifth, conducted by Wagner, you haven't heard it at all. That's a very interesting observation. So immediately, of course, the festival, the Wagner's music, created a huge controversy in musical circles. So we cannot talk about the recent history of Bayreuth without talking about Wagner and his family and his descendants who made this history. Actually, it is the Wagner's descendants to whom we owe the unpleasant history of Bayreuth in the 20th century. I need to mention King Ludwig II of Bavaria, whom we, of course, know and visited his boy toy castles, doll houses, but he was a very good benefactor of Wagner, and it's not clear if Wagner could have achieved as much as he did with the productions of his work if the king wouldn't help him. No wonder the king's bust now rests in front of the Wanfried house. Now, Bayreuth as an idea, Bayreuth as a dream. So Wagner dreamed about the theater of the future as early as in 1849. He gave it a lot of thought. He decided that ideal theater will have noble simplicity and quiet grandeur, free of ornaments and made of wood, with the best optical and acoustic conditions to serve the musical drama. Wagner was obsessed with the Greek auditorium, which is the best way to see things, and the orchestra hidden beneath the stage. He also thought of invisible machinery to make stage action seamless and natural. What's interesting, Wagner thought the ideal theater will be provisional, a raw theater made of boards and beams, erected according to my plan on a beautiful field in the city of Zurich, equipped with the decorations and machinery necessary to produce Siegfried. This was written in 1850. And Wagner thought the ideal theater should be used several times and then torn down, burned together with the score. So in this sense, Wagner was the inventor of the Burning Man. So Wagner's theater of the future, he kind of reviewed his ideas. He didn't think of a provisional theater anymore. He thought of a wooden theater with a totally functional, in a small provincial town, with a totally functional interior. Unspoiled audience with attention focused only on the stage. He thought it should be a folk theater. Unspoiled audience is the audience unpolluted with the previous ideas and education about art. Of course, it should have a Greek auditorium with wooden seating, providing the unobscured view of the stage, sunken orchestra, and only such theater would be worthy of his Gesamtkunstwerk. So he, for the first production of the Ring, strange machines were used to create the impression of floating in the water. And this is a photograph of the design for the ring with the, rocks in it. So when I look at this, what comes to mind? What comes to mind is this. The Lepage production at the Met actually fulfilled Wagner's dream of floating Rhine maidens. They were not carried around on supports as he envisioned, but they were floating, hung on the cables, and had a freedom to do many things. So Lepage fulfilled the dream of Wagner in this sense. So the construction of the Festspielhaus started in 1874. Originally, it was owned by Wagner because he collected the money and his family had to pay the debts until the beginning of the 19th century. There was a lot of debt associated with the theater. And since 1914, the theater was in possession of the Wagner family. Of course, it underwent several alterations and additions. In 1941, the Americans owned the building and they used it for all kinds of purposes. The soldiers lived there, there was a warehouse, whatnot, and that condition deteriorated greatly. The Society of the Friends of Bayreuth that we know was formed in 1949 and raised money for the restoration. And in 1973, it was transferred from the family to the Richard Wagner Foundation and has since belonged to the people. The Bayreuth Festspielhaus is the largest freestanding timber structure ever built. How about that? It is, of course, built from wood and clad in brick and stone. It has continental seating, that's how it is called now, and the sunken orchestra pit, and many stage element innovations. The seating capacity is 1,925 spectators. Here are some old photographs, how the green hill became wooded, landscaped, and beautiful as it is today. The Festspielhaus interior is very simple, as Wagner wanted, but it is very elegant. It is elegant. And look at this comparison that I'm making. This is the ceiling of the theater, and this is a room in the new palace. This is Bayreuth Rococo. And are there any similarities that we see here? The elegance and the beauty and the relative simplicity of the design. At the time when the theater was built, Wagner built his own residence, the Villa Wanfried, one delusion or madness and Fried, piece of freedom. And along the facade of the building, we can see the following writing. Here, where my delusions have found peace, let this place be named Wanfried, his delusions, his dreams, and his ideas. So it was built in 1872 to 1874, and the Wagner family moved into it while it was still being built. In 1973, Wolfgang and Winifred Wagner gifted this building to the city of Bayreuth. Inside, as many of us have seen, it is simple and beautiful. Also, it's decorated with the busts of contemporaries and classics. It is a very nice space to be. The piano, the Steinway, the Wagner Steinway is there. Unfortunately, this part of the house was bombed during the Allied bombing in 1945, and but it was restored to its former glory. I found these historical photographs and a postcard dating back to the time when Wagner lived there. Please look at the living room. It is furnished with plenty of chairs and ottomans to house big parties. Wagner's family was not small, and there was a lot of visiting singers, conductors, musicians whom Wagner entertained in this living room. This living room was reproduced in the Berikowski production of the Meistersingers. Here is the last, what is considered to be the last photo of Wagner, taken in 1882, not long before his death in Venice. And we can see Cosima here and two daughters, and the two people are friends, and one of them is Zhukovsky, I think he was a painter, who worked for Wagner, and the other one, I don't remember who it is. So Wagner and Cosima, his wife, are buried, of course, behind the Wanfried, together with their two dogs, Marky and Russ. Poor Marky, he survived Wagner, but he was so despondent at the loss of his master that he died shortly thereafter. Included in the Wagner estate is Siegfried House. Siegfried House was built in 1894 for Wagner's son Siegfried, who had quite a family. Siegfried died in 1930, but his widow Winifred lived there until her death in 1980. The decor of the ground floor has been kept in its original 1930 state. It is Art Deco style, and it is very elegant too, but in its own different manner. So there are some of the decorative elements of this house. Very pretty. Very controversial, because Hitler used to frequent this house. Let's talk about Wagner's family. And how did it happen that they became what they became? Let's start with Cosima. Cosima was born Francesca Gaetana Cosima Wagner, née Liszt, of course, and he had a very long life. She was 24 years junior to Wagner, and of course she adored him, and she continued his work on many levels. Cosima was the daughter of Franz Liszt and Marie Dagout. Marie Dagout, née Flavigny, was French nobility, and she was a historian and writer, and her nom de plume was Daniel Stern. Daniel Stern, that's her nom de plume. She wrote under the name of Daniel Stern. She was quite popular in her day. Of course, she had an affair with Liszt, and she bore 3 children to him. And look at this picture, how skinny and unattractive Cosima was, and how much she looks like her father. But she bloomed and turned into an attractive young woman, unlike the teenager that she was. So these are famous photographs. We've all know them and seen them. And here I would like to say a few words about Cosima, because I view Cosima, as many people do, as the root of all evils in Bayreuth. So Cosima ran the festival in till 1907, when after that she retired and her son Siegfried took over. She was opposed to any theatrical innovations, and she was very strict about adhering to the original productions of Wagner's work. It's interesting that after the premiere of The Ring, Wagner was so dissatisfied with the production that he said, we need to burn it and start from square one. We're starting from scratch. But Cosima viewed everything as that her husband did sacrosanct, and she maintained it. What's interesting, she shared Wagner's convictions of German cultural and racial superiority. And under her influence, Bayreuth became increasingly identified with anti-Semitism. She drove all Jews out of Bayreuth, and actually Bayreuth, under her guidance, became Judenfrei. It was known, it was a defining aspect of Bayreuth for decades, and flowed into the Nazi era, which followed her death in 1930. She was widely perceived as the savior of the festival, but her legacy is very controversial. The critic and librettist Philip Henscher wrote this: under the guidance of her repulsive racial theorist son-in-law, Chamberlain, Cosima tried to turn Bayreuth into a center for the cult of German purity. By the time she died, Wagner's reputation was at the forefront of a terrible political dynamism. Antique stations of his work were presented to audiences of brown shirts. The close association of the festival with Hitler and the Nazis during the 1930s was much of the work of Winifred, her daughter-in-law, rather than Cosima. Although Henschler asserts that Cosima was as much to blame as anyone. In Henschler's judgment, Wagner was a genius, but also a fairly appalling human being. Cosima was just an appalling human being. Tells you something, huh? Here is a picture of the Wagner family taken in 1881. It's very hard to see the details here, but of course we see Cosima and Richard. This is one of his friends and colleagues. Blandine von Bülow, the daughter of von Bülow, Isolde von Bülow, Daniela von Bülow, Siegfried, and Eva Wagner. I think they had a very good discount from the cloth manufacturer on this fabric, just bought it wholesale for everyone. Cosima's daughter, oldest daughter, Daniela von Bülow, she was from von Bülow himself. She was married to an art historian, Henry Thode, and she was a member of the Nazi Party. The daughter Eva married Houston Stuart Chamberlain, a British-born historian. He adopted as his personal creed the fanatical form of German nationalism based on principles of extreme racial and cultural purity. And Cosima had considerable empathy with this theory. According to some, she came to love him as her son, perhaps even more. And Chamberlain became the dominant figure within the Wagner circle. Daniela was a member of the party. Of course, Winifred Wagner, the wife of Siegfried, was an unrepentant member of the party until her death, and Eva as well. So this family first planted seeds or tilled the soil for the seeds to grow, the seeds of hate and racial inequity and anti-Semitism. So Wagner here is with his little son, Siegfried, the heir to the throne, which he was. Siegfried himself was a composer and a conductor and director of the Bayreuth Festival from 1907. He took over from his mother to 1930 when he died. And then Winifred took the reins. So Winifred was a terrible woman. We know that. Wagner and his children, daughters and sons, 2 sons, little boys, Siegfried and Wieland, and Winifred with the daughters, Verena and Fridolin. Winifred was a great friend and admirer of Hitler, and Hitler was a frequent guest at Wanfried. I just collected some photographs to show how this relationship was more than much less than formal, because they were friends on many levels. He was a great influence on the boys, and he was young Wolfgang and Winifred here with Hitler. Look at the smile, welcoming smile of her friend Adolf. For her friend Adolf, he was much admired by the children and actually supported them. Adoring crowds, crying for Führer in Bayreuth. All this came about not for nothing. So Bayreuth became a stronghold of right-wing parties since 1920 and the center of Nazi ideology. In 1933, it was made the capital of the Nazi, it's called Gau Bavarian Eastern March. So it is the region of Bavarian Eastern Bavaria. The Nazis and Hitler often visited the Bayreuth Festival and tried to turn Bayreuth into a Nazi model town. It was one of the few towns where planning was administered directly from Berlin. So the Nazis swept it into their propaganda machine and used it for their own purposes. And during the war, of course, there was no money to stage new productions or have lavish receptions. But the government, Hitler, and the rest used the theater to raise the patriotic spirit of the soldiers. And mostly they played the Meistersingers, and the soldiers and the wounded marched from the railway station to the theater to see these very patriotic productions. Look at the swastikas leading the way to the theater. This is hard to swallow. The front of the Festspiel house decorated with swastikas on the occasion of Hitler's birthday is also hard to swallow. But not everybody had to swallow. Some didn't want to take part in this awful rigmarole, macabre dance. For example, Toscanini, who conducted in Bayreuth in 1929 and 1931, refused to return to Bayreuth when after he received a personal invitation from Hitler in 1933. Toscanini was a great admirer of Wagner. Here is one of the postcards that he wrote after visiting Bayreuth, and you can see the postcard shows the grave of Wagner. And he wrote here, here's the tomb of the greatest composer of the century. Toscanini befriended Fridolin Wagner, the daughter of Siegfried, and Fridolin never succumbed to the poison of Nazism. Toscanini worked with the newly formed Palestine Symphony Orchestra. It was a Jewish orchestra formed in Palestine in 1936. That's where his allegiance was. Bayreuth was almost destroyed by the Allied bombing in 1945. 70% of the city were destroyed. 30% of the population perished. So Bayreuth was left behind by Nazis in ruin. But it was restored. It was restored, of course, to the current state we see it in today. I want to show you two different cemeteries in Bayreuth. Cemeteries are always important because these are historical places. That's the place where you can see who lived in Bayreuth and how they were buried, and you get a deeper understanding of the history. Of course, the Bayreuth Cemetery houses the crypt of Franz Liszt. He died in Bayreuth. He didn't live there long. He was already very sick. He lived next door to Manfred, and he died there. He was buried at the Bayreuth Cemetery, but this crypt was bombed during the war, and I would say Liszt was blown to smithereens, but the crypt itself was restored, and you can visit it today. Also in the cemetery are the graves, the tombs of the Wagner family, everybody with the exception of Wagner himself, of course, and Cosima. But there is another cemetery in Bayreuth, which is not glamorous. It cannot be visited but one day a year. On November 7th, the anniversary of the Kristallnacht. This is the Jewish cemetery in Bayreuth that you cannot enter. It is surrounded by a stone wall and locked in fear of vandalism, I believe. So right here, there is a memorial to the Jews who were expelled from Bayreuth in 1938 and never seen again. So there is about 1,100 tombstones in the cemetery. It's fully overgrown with trees, Nobody is buried there. The synagogue that I mentioned also stands. And this is the synagogue, the way it stood after the Kristallnacht in November 1938. It was completely destroyed, but the Vandals didn't burn it because it shares a wall with the Imperial Theater, Margravial Theater. Interesting, huh? So just a little snippet of a fact. In 1759, Bayreuth's Margrave Frederick, who had a Jewish chess player and a painter in his court, sold the town's opera house, plus a second building to a Jewish businessman. This second building later became the synagogue. So it was ransacked in 1938, and 28 scrolls of Torah were stolen. And this building sat like this for quite some time until there were funds enough, the Jewish community could restore it. And now it conducts services, but not very often. I want to show you an exhibition, The Silenced Voices. It is, I would say, a good exclamation mark after the gruesome history of Jews in Germany and in Bayreuth in particular. The Silenced Voices depicts Jews who worked at the Festspiel House and in Germany generally from 1876 to 1945. Cosima used Jews just like Wagner did. They were ready to shelve their anti-Semitic prejudices in the interest of Bayreuth. And in Wagner days, a lot of Jews, singers, musicians, conductors, worked at Bayreuth and were friends of Wagner. Cosima once even noted in her notes that there are so many Jews there, they can start a synagogue. For example, Hermann Levy, the first conductor who conducted Parsifal, and the last Jewish conductor who worked at Bayreuth. Wagner valued his musicianship and liked his work, but following Cosima's demands, he wrote to the king and requested that Hermann Levy be removed, to which from conducting this very Christian opera, but King Ludwig II was unbending on this issue. Cosima expressed this view that between Aryan and Semite blood there could not exist no bonds whatever. And in accordance with this doctrine, she would not invite Mahler to conduct at Bayreuth, although she valued his artistic advice. So she purged Bayreuth of all Jews. It wasn't Wagner who did it, it was Cosima Wagner who did it. And it becomes abundantly clear after you look and read these panels, look at the pictures and read the panels. There are about 40 panels there that look like gravestones, and they are hard to digest. First time I saw them, I couldn't deal with it. I just couldn't. I read a few and I couldn't do more. Second time, I went through all of them. Here they are. They're permanent. They will be there forever. And this is the bust of Wagner, which was commissioned by Hitler from his own sculptor. 12 members of the festival orchestra became victims of the Nazis. They were first banished to ghettos and then murdered in concentration and death camps. Of course, Richard Wagner really laid the ideological foundation for all his successes in his treatise, Judaism and Music, and especially with his anti-Semitic writings in later years. He was truly a radical anti-Semite. His idea to expel Jews from Germany came about in 1879. He tolerated Levy, although he considered that the Jewish race is the born enemy of a pure human race and all that is noble. So they are enemies of pure human race and all that is noble. Very sad. And I want to show you this portrait of Hermann Levy. And this will be our last image. I saw this painting, this portrait, in a museum in Berlin, and it struck me very much. I look at this face, I see the face of a Jewish man. This face shines, and his eyes emanate light. When seeing this face, I think of art, eternal art, that always was and always be, not the holy German art, quoting Hans Sachs, but all human art that is not dependent on its creator's religion or ethnicity, and that cannot be besmirched by the dirty hands and vile ideas of its occasional handlers. And Bayreuth, with its long and often inconvenient and uncomfortable history, embodies to us the art itself and continues to shine and beckon us, inviting to new experiences and adventures. Thank you very much.
Am I there?
You're there, and
Okay.
I'm there.
Thank you, Emma. This was really, really very interesting. And, you know, if folks would like to raise their hands and ask questions, I'm sure Emma would be more than happy to take the questions. Nick Pilam raised his hand. Let me,
Okay.
I'll read it for you. Or do you want to talk, Nick?
Just read
Go
it.
ahead and let him talk. Okay.
Oh, Nick Pillam, where is it? I can't find him. Could you read the question first? Maybe I'll find him.
Let's see. Let's see. Don't see a question from Nick written out there. So promote panelist. I can promote him to panelist. Okay. Go ahead and talk, Nick, if you can.
Nick?
Well, this doesn't seem.
Okay,
Yeah.
now
Okay.
that might work now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We are.
Oh, how about that? Hey, well, I'm a longtime member, but not a very active one. Only come to one event, I think, all these years. I have been to Bayreuth when I was a student in Germany one year and had the opportunity to see the ring, which was fantastic. However, regarding Cosima, I mean, I've read a little about Wagner over the years and about Cosima. And so I was always a little bit curious about why our group celebrates her birthday, when she seems like a despicable sort of person. And I was wondering what the thinking around that might be.
I can answer that. Yeah, awful as she was Wagner's muse. She was a supporter of his ideas. Without Cosima, we wouldn't have had Siegfried's Idyll. You know, he was much inspired by her, and a lot of his later music we probably kind of owe to her. This is to acknowledge the muse of a great genius. Right, Terry?
She was also born on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why. And that this tradition goes back a long ways. We call it our holiday party or our Cosima party. And I suppose we could stop doing that, but I don't think it's our job to rewrite history.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with that, but I just I ask only for what I said, which is my impression was she was rather disagreeable, and I was initially kind of surprised that her birthday becomes a event that we're celebrating, but I can see why from the muse point of view.
Muse and the upholder of the festival. You know, we owe the fact that the festival exists today to her. She didn't close the shop upon Wagner's death. She continued. It's too bad it turned out so terribly. But I think we can put this behind
Indeed.
and enjoy the music.
That for sure.
I've got, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could, I'm going to mute you and stop this video. And we have a question. Where to go? Now I had somebody with a hand raised there. It was Judy Young, maybe. Let's see. I'm looking for the hand raise. Oh, here it is, Judy Young. Judy, would you like to talk?
Yep.
Go ahead and talk. Speak up, please.
Judy? She's not talking.
Okay, she's got her hand raised. Unmute yourself, Judy.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Visiting Bayreuth for the first time this summer. Besides the areas that you had shown on your wonderful talk and PowerPoint presentation. Do you have any suggestions about side trips or that sort of thing in the daytime before the performances?
You know, all the places that I shown are very interesting, and I recommend visiting all of them. The Hermitage, the palaces, very good. But I specifically recommend the spa and the bathhouse, which is called the Lohengrin Therme. You can reach it by bus, and it has a number of the most luxurious pools with waters of different temperature, and it is a great place to relax and just be in the water from a clean source. So yes, when you're in Bayreuth, try to do as much as you can. It's pretty unique.
Great, thank you very much. And then the
You're welcome.
performances themselves, it's hard seating and no air conditioning.
Well, it is hard seating, but now you can borrow a pillow from the garderobe. From the cloakroom, they give you these pillows or two for free, which makes it much more palatable. I never experienced a problem actually sitting there. And no air conditioning is tough, but pray to the gods for good weather, for cooler weather. It's part of Bayreuth experience. There is nothing we can do about it.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Lois Silverstein, can you, you should be allowed to talk here now. Go ahead and talk. No?
No. There is a question from Jahan.
Oh, okay, let's see. Jahan,
Mm-hmm.
okay. You're allowed to talk. Go ahead and talk, Jahan. Whoops. I don't know what's with these, what's with these, I haven't done this before. They've changed, I apologize for a little bit of goofiness here. They changed the, upgraded it.
He says he has no microphone. Okay, but his question is, excellent historical perspective. Thank you, Emma. How do the finances of Bayreuth work these days? Ticket sales, support from the German government and her band? I don't know. I think they're doing fine. The tickets are expensive. There is always a demand for it. The Friends of Bayreuth, the Verband, receives money from various sources. There is no talk of closing Bayreuth at this time. So I think they're fine. What do you think, Terry?
Oh, I think they, you know, there's always complaining going on in Germany about how the government completely funds the festival, which is not the case. They get a lot of independent funding from people who love Bayreuth, and they also sell very expensive tickets. And the tourism that comes to the area is very much appreciated by merchants and the people in the surrounding area, the people who have the hotels. Although they do have the university there, which is a large draw, and it is also a convention draw there too. So there are lots of things in Bayreuth that help uplift their economic status, and it's not a bad place to go. I mean, I've always enjoyed trips I have taken there. One thing I wanted to point out, and this is because I gave a talk about the Festspielhaus one time, a long time ago, is that beautiful ceiling in the Festspielhaus. That is not the ceiling. That is actually a suspended canvas, which has been painted. And the reason why there isn't an additional ceiling there is that they wanted it to be like, literally like the inside of a violin. Like you were sitting in a violin listening to it, and the walls and the ceiling and everything about it, it helps with the reverberation and the lushness of the sound there. It's really quite amazing. But that is painted canvas. we have any more questions? I'm not
Yes,
seeing.
we do. Yes, we
Okay.
do. From Marianne Seller. Are there public performances of Wagner's operas at the Palace Baroque Opera House during the same time as the Festspielhaus is having performances? Is it possible to get tickets in advance for those? No, there aren't. The rights to perform Wagner belong to the Festspielhaus. I think that at the Baroque Opera House, they occasionally play Baroque operas, but you have to watch their schedule and get tickets in advance, and it does not necessarily coincide with the time of the festival.
There is actually an active curator of music there. At least there was some years ago. I don't know if anything has changed hands. Michael Hofstetter, which is he's a very famous conductor of Baroque opera, has been the person who has been organizing performances of strictly Baroque opera in the Margrave Theater.
Yeah.
It was completely renovated. It was literally just falling apart. And they did a very beautiful and ornate reconstruction of it and refurbishing it. Prior to that, when they had the 100th anniversary of or was it the 50th anniversary? I'm blanking on it. Maybe it was the 50th anniversary of the Neue Bayreuth. We had an exhibition in there of all of the Ring productions, costumes from all of the Rings productions, down on the floor of this theater that had turned into a shambles. And they had this little shrine of costumes of Wotan and props and so on in there. That was really quite interesting on one of my visits there.
Terry, we have a comment from Louis Silverstein.
Yes.
I suggest the name of the party at Christmas be festival party or something else than Cosima. I agree with what was previously said. The board will consider that, I would say. Yeah.
I don't see why not. It predates my membership in the society, and there are some people who are still members who might want to talk about that, but it predates me, and I've just kept up the tradition in scheduling things.
Yeah. Peter Fellman comments that you can do a really great tour of the Margravian Opera House. True. True. Yes. And Jahan asks another question. Can you speak a bit about the Wagner Museum and the opportunity to listen to almost every recorded opera performance? By Wagner Museum, I suppose you mean the mansion? Or is there another museum there?
No, I believe that's something that was like in the basement of House von Fried.
Yes, in the basement.
It's been
yes.
I haven't been there since it had the complete renovation, and the because they had water intrusion, and the basement was constantly flooding because that little river that runs behind it would overflow and flood the basement, and they did all kinds of stuff to prevent that from happening. And I haven't been back there since they did that.
Well, I have, and in the basement is fully functional. It houses some displays of Wagner's original clothing and Cosima's too, and some objects in their possession. There's also this magic electronic book which plays Wagner's music, and it's fun to go through this book and see actually the scores and how the instruments play. It's fascinating, but I'm not sure about the opportunity to listen to almost every recorded opera performance. I'm not sure what you mean, Jahan. I don't think there is an opportunity in this basement to listen to almost every recorded opera performance. I hope this answers your question. Okay. Yeah, the addition next door to Wanfried. Oh, the addition, Peter Fellman says the addition next door to Wanfried.
There is a museum that's on the opposite side of where the Siegfried Wagner house is. Again, I haven't been back there in many years. So yeah, there is a new museum over there.
Yes. Okay.
Well, why
Somebody.
don't we just go ahead and wrap it up then?
Okay, there's one more question that popped
I-
up.
Boy, you got a better eye than I do.
That's where the museum is, costume sets, etc. Right, that's the museum. The one that I'm talking about, with the costume sets and yeah, and the book, the magic book. So that's all I know about it. I don't know about the opportunity to listen to recorded operas there. I don't think so, actually. Okay, so can we wrap it up? It's been very long.
Yeah, I think we probably should. You could go and put up the slide for the next talks. The next programs we're going to have coming up.
Yes. Just one moment.
And I have some additions to what's on the,
Oh, okay. Let me share screen with you.
because
Okay,
I don't have my notes with me on what the dates are here.
here you go.
Okay, here we are. On April 27th, we'll be at the JCCSF, and we'll see a documentary film on Parsifal. Now, this has been viewed by the Society before in the past. The name of it is Parsifal, Indiana Jones, and Richard Wagner. And in this, the documentarian Werner Botha he travels the route that is presumed to be the knights carrying the Grail out of the Holy Land and through Lower Europe and up into where it's allegedly that they say it is the Grail in Valencia, Spain. So he'll take the travel, and then he'll interject some interesting anecdotes from how filmmaking affected it with the Indiana Jones, who was out looking for the Grail as well. So that will be in April. And then in May, on May 18th, we're going to welcome Jonathan Cooner, who is going to be presenting Legend of the Ring in the summer season of West Edge Opera over at the Scottish Rite Center on Lake Merritt in Oakland, a very lovely venue. I'm currently working on obtaining some discounts for our members to buy tickets so they can go, which will be great. Jonathan will bring with him Tracy Cox, who will be singing the role of Brunhilde in Legend of the Ring. And then shortly after we conclude the program, we will adjourn and go to the Sunset Reservoir. Those who wish to go, it is not an open party. It's going to be by reservation. We're going to have a little birthday celebration for Richard Wagner at the Sunset Reservoir Brewery. And information on that will be coming up soon. It is going to be a meal with beverages and so on. And the seating is limited, so people will have to register and pay in advance. And then when it's closed, it's closed. We can't have any more people. So if that's something that tickles your fancy, you may want to, as soon as the invitations go out, you might want to jump on that right away. I'll also go out a little bit farther, which we don't have up on our website just yet. Where are my notes? Going forward a little bit, September, we will welcome Simon Williams. And I had hoped he could be here and give a talk while the Tristan and Isolde is going to be presented this fall at the San Francisco Opera. And I'd hoped I could entice him to come up during the run. However, he's going to do some of the guild lectures, I think. And then he's heading off on a much needed vacation. He's retired now, and he's going to have a big family reunion back in the UK and spend some time in the Yorkshire Dales. For any of you Harriet fans, that's where he's going to be in much of September and October. In October, though, on the 14th, which is a Monday. Yes, it's a Monday. This is a little bit unusual, but I'll explain that. We will be welcoming Paul Curran, who will be the director of the Tristan and Isolde performance. So he's visited us before in the past, and he's a delightful speaker, and he's going to be the director. That is going to be on a Monday evening. We're going to do it in the evening because people might want to come in and see this or hear Director Curran. And we're going to be at the JCC for that in our regular room, and probably have maybe a little bit of maybe a little beverage and some snacks or something afterwards, and create a little bit of a more informal event for, it's not really an event, just in a more an informal opportunity for people to chat and gather and share fellowship. So that's what I've got so far for the rest of the year. I mean, we will have a holiday celebration, and I haven't even started working on that yet with the team, the events team. So we'll be working on that too. So that's what we have going forward. So anything else, Emma?
No, thank you very much for your attention, folks. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for being with us. We really appreciate it. These programs are here for you, and we're glad that we got a good turnout today. We had 57 people with us today. And so thank you for your attendance, and we'll keep having live meetings and also Zoom meetings when it's maybe difficult to bring a speaker in. We'll have the Zoom still. So thank you very much for participating, folks. We'll see you next time.
For out-of-towners, please come to see our Tristan. We'll have dinner. Come.